Today, we're going to peel back the layers on one of history's most fascinating and, honestly, most mysterious figures. We're talking about a man who lives right at the crossroads of scripture, of actual history, and of secret ritual.
At the very heart of this whole thing is a drama with some really serious consequences. Think about it. A secret so important, people were willing to kill for it. A master who swore he would protect it, no matter what. And then, a brutal betrayal that has just echoed through the centuries. This, right here, is the story of Hiram Abiff.
But that really is the main question, isn't it? Who is this guy? Is he a real historical person? A craftsman from the Bible? A tragic hero in a play? Or something else entirely? To even begin to find the answer, we have to start where his story is told most famously.
So, our first stop is inside the Masonic Lodge. This is where the legend of Hiram Abiff isn't just some story they tell, it's the absolute core of their most important ritual. It's basically a dramatic play that's all about the death of the temple's great architect. Okay, so the legend goes like this. 3 craftsmen, they get together and conspire to literally beat the secret word of a master mason out of Hiram himself. But he refuses. He's bound by a sacred oath, and he won't break it. So at each of the temple's gates, they confront him, and each time he refuses, they strike him. The third blow, well, it's fatal. The master architect is killed, and he takes that secret with him to the grave.
But here's the thing. This isn't just a story with a moral. In the Masonic ritual for the 3rd degree, the person being initiated actually takes on the role of Hiram. They go through a symbolic death and are then raised from the grave. It's all meant to represent a kind of spiritual rebirth, a move to a higher level of understanding.
And the story gets even more mysterious with this one key symbol, acacia. This plant, which is a symbol of immortality, was said to have been used to mark Hiram's secret grave. So the phrase, acacia is known to me, well, it implies that you know the master's secret, a hidden truth that goes beyond death itself.
And this is really the crucial point, isn't it? Even Masonic Grand Lodges will tell you that the whole account is an allegory. It's a powerful story, for sure, but it's used to teach lessons about fidelity, about loyalty, and about the immortality of the soul. So if the climax of the story, the murder, is basically an invention, then where did the man himself come from?
For that answer, we have to turn from ritual to scripture. So let's jump over to the Bible, where we find the very first mention, not of a murdered architect, but of a brilliant craftsman who helped build King Solomon's temple.
And you know what? Right away, we hit a puzzle. There are 2 different accounts. The first book of Kings just calls him Hiram. It says he's a widow's son from the tribe of Naphtali, a specialist in bronze, and that Solomon sent for him. But then you look at 2 Chronicles, and he's called Hiram Abiff. His mother is from the daughters of Dan, and he's skilled in, well, pretty much everything. Gold, silver, bronze, iron, the whole shebang. And in this version, he's sent by King Hiram of Tyre. So, same guy or 2 different people? The details just don't quite line up.
That little difference in the name, Hiram Abiff, might actually hold a pretty big clue. The Hebrew word Abi isn't necessarily part of his name. Some scholars argue it's a title, a sign of respect, kind of like saying master or chief counselor. So maybe he wasn't Hiram Abiff, but Hiram the Master, a title that showed just how incredible his skill was. This craftsman was clearly a big deal. But so was the king who sent him.
So let's shift our focus for a minute. Let's move from the craftsman to the powerful king mentioned in the story, King Hiram of Tyre. And this is where a really fascinating revisionist theory completely changes how we look at this period of history.
Okay, so a historian named Damian Mackey puts forward this pretty radical idea. He says that some historical records we usually date to the 18th century BC are actually misdated by about 800 years. And when you realign those timelines, he believes the biblical King Hiram of Tyre is actually a much, much older and more powerful figure, Lin, the Amorite king of Yamkad.
And listen, Lin was no small-time ruler. Ancient cuneiform tablets from Syria, these things called the Mari letters, they make his power crystal clear. They say that while the famous Hammurabi of Babylon had maybe 10 or 15 kings who followed his lead, Lin had 20. This was a man with immense influence, a true king of kings, and that sounds a lot more like a fitting ally for the great King Solomon, doesn't it?
So how in the world did all these different threads, a historical king, a biblical craftsman, and this dramatic murder plot, get woven together into one of the most lasting legends in all of Western esotericism? For that, we really need to understand a huge turning point in Masonic history. See, back in the early 1700s, Freemasonry was changing, big time. It was shifting from being a practical guild for actual working stonemasons, what they call operative masonry, to becoming more of a philosophical society for gentlemen, which they call speculative masonry. And as its whole purpose started to evolve, it needed a richer, more symbolic story for its rituals.
And this, right here, is where it gets really, really interesting. There's a document from 1726, it's called the Graham Manuscript, and it reveals an earlier legend that was probably being used at the time. But the hero isn't Hiram, it's Noah. The manuscript describes his 3 sons going to his grave looking for a great secret. They tried to raise his body, but the flesh literally gives way. So they agree to come up with a substitute word for the one that was lost. Does any of that sound familiar?
I mean, when you put these 2 legends right next to each other, the parallels are they're undeniable. Both have 3 figures at a grave. Both have a failed attempt to raise a body because the flesh parts from the bone. And both end with the creation of a substitute word. It seems pretty clear that the dramatic structure of the Hiram story wasn't just invented out of nowhere, it was almost certainly adapted from this older story, just swapping out Noah for the temple's builder to make it a better fit for a society based on a craft.
So what we're seeing is that the legend is this rich tapestry, and it's woven from scripture, from history, from even older myths. But its real power, the reason it has lasted so long, isn't in its historical accuracy. It's in its deep, multi-layered meaning.
A Masonic scholar named Ferenc Szebok, he breaks the legend down into 6 different spheres of meaning. On one level, it's a moral lesson about integrity. It's an ethical warning against greed and ambition. It's a symbolic story about death and rebirth. It's an initiatory experience that's meant to change you. It's a teaching on the immortality of the soul. And finally, and maybe most importantly, at its heart, it's a call for brotherly love and compassion.
And that brings us to the most important point of all. The story of Hiram Abiff has lasted all this time not because it's a factual report of a murder, but because it's an incredibly profound allegory. It uses the figures of a powerful king and a master craftsman to explore these huge, timeless human themes, things like loyalty, mortality, and that unending search for light and for truth.
Which kind of leaves us with one final thought to chew on. When a story has the power to teach deep moral and spiritual truths across hundreds of years, can an allegorical legend, like the story of Hiram, sometimes hold a deeper, more resonant truth than the bare facts of history ever could? That's definitely something we're thinking about.